Welcome to the Fort Wayne Cinema Center. My name is Jim Gabbard. I'm the director of the Garrett Museum of Art.
And my name's Angela Green. I'm the gallery coordinator and curator at Garrett Museum of Art.
And I'm Ann Marks, the author of Vivian Maier Developed.
Hi, my name is Cambry, and I am one of the senior curators here at Fort Wayne Cinema Center. We are joined by author Ann Marks, and we are here also with very special guests. We have Angela Green and Jim Gabbard from Garrett Museum of Art. How's everybody doing today?
We're doing well.
Good.
Yeah. So, Ann, we're thrilled to talk with you. Angela and I both saw you in Chicago when you spoke about the book Vivian Maier Developed.
Great.
We both went up there and got a book from you, and you so graciously signed it for us. So thank you. Good to meet up with you again. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the movie that we're going to be showing and Finding Vivian Maier, but also a lot about your book. So I guess our first general question to you is, what got you interested or involved in the idea of doing a book on Vivian Maier?
Well, actually, it was the film Finding Vivian Maier completely. I had never even heard about her until I saw the film. So maybe someone today is going to write a book too. But I was so compelled to find out more after the movie because they knew so little about her family background. Like one thing was she had lived in New York for 25 years and they hadn't found anyone in New York that knew her. And also her whole photography kind of regime, just that she saved so many photographs and didn't share them, and that she ended up, a third of her images were just undeveloped film in a box. So I knew there had to be a story there, and you'll hear Mary Ellen Mark, the photographer, comment on that.
Well, as a photographer myself, it's amazing that somebody would take all these photos and then not develop them, and not see it through from that standpoint. And we all think that's one of the most fascinating things about this story. Can you go into a little bit more detail about like the process of developing the film, what they did, and how that all went together?
Well, I know that John Maloof and Jeff Goldstein were the two people that owned most of the archive, of her archive. And they developed the same kind of procedures together. So everything, would be the same. And they had to get special processors because the film was really old by then and they didn't want to lose very much. So they had to make decisions on that. They decided on a sort of a standard size and a way of printing the photographs so that it would all seem very cohesive. So it was a huge undertaking because she had 140,000 images.
That's an incredible amount of photographs from individual photographers, especially working in film days when there were either 12 or 24 shots on a roll of film. So that is a lot of photography. Angela, did you have a question?
I do. And do you know how many are still undeveloped? And are there
They're all
plans
developed now. It was very exciting because there was the last rolls of color film still need to be developed. I was in on that with John Maloof because at that point I was the one identifying the years of the pictures and the locations. So I think I might have even been the only one, other than what's in my book, to see those last rolls. A lot of them were pictures of newspapers, which we could talk about.
I was just reading that, refreshing my memory, reading that in your book this morning about when the newspaper hoarding started for Vivian. I would also like to know what Vivian didn't, let's go back to Vivian personally. She didn't sell photographs, but there was something about a first sale where she sold something for $1, and that seemed to be a standard price if she did sell something. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, that photograph, she didn't make very many notes at all, other than a date and sometimes a location. That's why it was really hard, to find people. But there's a famous picture she took of a couple in a carriage. And it's outside Central Park in front of the Plaza Hotel. And it's actually, she took a picture of models being shot for an advertisement, although most people think it's very real and intimate kind of shot. So at that time, because I guess the commercial aspect of that, she actually noted that she sold the frame for $1. But for the first 4 or 5 years that she took up photography, she was looking to be a commercial photographer, and she tried different things to sell it. She would go to film sets and take pictures of celebrities, and she tried to make postcards, and there were a variety of forays into commercial photography. But then her hoarding disorder kicked in right before she came to Chicago. I mean, she may have been hoarding already a bit. And so then she literally couldn't let go of her photographs because they became part of her, just like she was hoarding newspapers.
That particular photo you're talking about the couple in Central Park, in front of Central Park, we do have that one, just for everyone to know. That one is part of what is being shown at Garrett Museum of Art right now. So we feel fortunate to get that one, because I think that's a special. They're all special, but
Yes.
that one's especially so. So thank you.
It has a great backstory. Like if you look at the whole contact sheet, you can see everybody's in heavy coats, and there's a stylist and a director around. And then if you look into the carriage, the man and woman are like in spring kind of outfits, no coats, and they're nuzzling each other. So it's a really fun thing to look at.
Yes. Vivian had a very good eye, obviously, for this, what we'll call street photography. So I would like to know more about her self-portraits and what you can tell us about those. I don't know how many there are, or if there is a number that you know, and why you might conjecture that she took self-portraits.
Yes, well, Howard Greenberg, who's the gallerist for Vivian Maier, and I think that that's her most important work, because she took so many and she took them in a variety of ways. So when I started my research, they had found 250 self-portraits in the archive. And by the time I was done, I found 500. So I was able, sometimes people didn't notice, they were complicated sometimes. And so that was exciting. But the big conclusion I had about her self-portraits were that they very much married with what was going on in her life. So for instance, when she was a happy nanny in Chicago, she didn't take pictures of her with her camera and looking like a photographer. Whereas in New York, she did when she was trying to be a commercial photographer. Then when she left that family and ended up going to a different one to watch a little girl named Inger, at first she was depressed about it, even though the Ginsburg family didn't know. And her self-portraits were very much bleak, and she started doing her shadow photos. So you can really understand, that proves that it was beyond just taking photographs. It was a way to express her feelings and to establish her identity and make a connection about her presence in the world. So they were very important.
That's very interesting, because we have several of her self-portraits up on display at Garrett, and her ability to use windows and mirrors. There's one in particular where someone is unloading a mirror off of a truck or something, and she's in it, and she's actually got a little bit of a smile on her face on that one. But some of the others you see are a more somber or tone in her facial expression.
That one, it was taken in Stuyvesant Town in New York, near toward her end of her stay there. And she was a nanny, and I think she was pretty happy there. And I think it was giving you a little wink, because she kind of got a place to do her self-portrait, like just spontaneously.
Tell me about how you picked the cover, because the cover, assuming you got to pick what you wanted on the cover, it's a self-portrait. So out of 500, now that we know that, why would you choose this one?
I just love that. And in fact, I own that photograph. And I feel like for the cover of a book, she's catching your eye. So you're really, getting a sense of Vivian. And it just shows her as the quintessential photographer that she was. And I was very lucky someone hadn't already snapped it up for a book cover. So I was very happy to use it.
That's true. I believe we have this one too at Garrett right now.
Yes, we do. That's one of
And
the,
upon
yeah.
entering the museum, that's one of the first ones that
Oh,
you
that's
see, because we
great.
wanted to put a self-portrait so everyone could see who she was right when they walked in.
Well, I think that's the
Um,
quintessential one, if you ask me.
Yeah,
It is,
great.
seems like one of the very important ones. Yes.
Yeah. Are there still researchers working on finding out the locations of all these hundreds of thousands of photos? Or has that all been finished also?
I don't know if anyone's actively working on it right now. I know that John Maloof donated a lot of work to the University of Chicago Museum that allows people to come in and study it, but I'm not on top of who's doing that now. Usually if someone needs to know a location or a date, they ask me about it, and then I either know or research it, just because I'm the one now that has spent so much time with the whole archive. Because you have to remember, part of it, 80% or 90% was John Maloof, but the other part was Jeff Goldstein's. So I was the first one that was able to see the whole continuity of pictures, because I was able to put them together. So you don't even know sometimes if an image, which archive, I mean, I know now, but which archive it came from.
Why do you think, or do you know how John Maloof picked Howard Greenberg Gallery? And I'm asking that because that's where we have the loan of our photos from.
Yes. He's the best. He's fantastic. He very early on, a lot of galleries, including his, didn't really want to take on a collection that didn't have vintage prints, because she had printed very little of her work, like 5%. And so there's a whole issue in photography about showing work or collecting work where the photographer wasn't the processor and printer. But he saw beyond that with Vivian's work.
Yeah. The collection that we have at the Garrett Museum of Art is all black and white, and it's beautiful and it's amazing, and it gives it somewhat of a, I don't know, timeless feel, a classic feel. But she did work a little bit in color, or started to work a little bit in color. How much color did she use, and is there a reason why she moved into color?
Well, I'm trying to think of the percent. There was a lot near the end, but I would say that the bulk is black and white. The color, she was very sort of an early adopter. So she had a tape recorder, like right when they came out, and went around interviewing people. And she started to use Super 8 film and took videos. She's always like, I have a tape of her just fooling around with gadgets, trying to figure out how they work. So when color film came out, it was natural that she would explore that. And there's certain, I've spent a lot of time with her color photographs, because I tend to love the black and white also. But there's certain ones that you wouldn't take if it wasn't color. It needed to be color to really work. Like there's one she took in Chicago of a convertible from behind, and it's cherry red, and there's white daisies like sort of frolicking in the back seat. They literally are shaped like that. And you get a sense of sort of a summer joyride that you wouldn't get in black and white.
What Vivian typically took a one shot and she was done. It's not like how many of us do now, where we've got our cell phone and we'll take, oh, let me get it at this angle, and now I'll walk over here and do this. But Vivian typically did a one shot type of thing. So tell more about that.
Yeah, let me tell you something really incredible about that. Yes, she usually found her subject, got what she wanted, and moved on. She was very confident and knew what she got. At the beginning, people thought it was to save money, but it didn't really seem like that, because even when someone else was paying for the photographs or the film, she did the one-shot deal. But anyway, I feel like 1954 was her best year. And there's one contact sheet there. So it's 12 images. And on that contact sheet, there's 4 exhibition prints quality prints on just one contact sheet, including the cover of my book. And another one of those is the library photo where there's a beautiful woman
Yes, from the
kind of
side.
going up the stairs of the New York Library. And we finally figured out that Vivian took that out of the bus window, because you see like an
Yes.
edge in the front. So on that, like most people, if they got one exhibition print in a day or a week, they would be so thrilled. And to have 4 in one contact sheet is unknown, really. It's just unbelievable.
Yes, she also did a lot of movie stars, Hollywood people that some of us will recognize. And I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, was Salvador Dali one of the first people that she photographed?
Yes, I think that might have been the first.
Okay.
And that's interesting because she shot him sort of from going up, like he looks like a towering figure. And it's so much more interesting than if you just shot him straight on. So you're like going up his body right to his mustache. So it really has a special feeling about it. But she loved celebrities. She had encyclopedic knowledge of celebrities and film. It was really incredible.
Yes, I saw, well, Kirk Douglas was one I remember, Audrey Hepburn, Jackie Gleason,
She had
I
everybody.
think. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it when I went through the whole archive. There was just almost anybody you could think of, like presidents, 4 presidents, I think. You know, she had Muhammad Ali. She had all the movie stars.
Yeah. She also was arrested once. So tell that story.
That was so interesting. I found that at the very end of my research, and I didn't even find it. Someone sent it in to John Maloof. But so there was a murder of a senator's daughter, or about to be senator's daughter, on the North Shore, I think Highland Park of Chicago. And she, I think if anything, she saw herself as like a photojournalist. And so she dashed over there and she joined the press pack. They had like a cordoned off area at the driveway because they didn't want the press walking around on the murder scene or even invading the family. But it wasn't close enough for Vivian. So she snuck around the property through like the guest house or the tenant's house or something, and over into where the family home was, like right there. And then she got caught and she was kicked out. And then she went down the street to where the funeral was being held. And then they saw her again. And I guess she was again being aggressive. And so they arrested her. That was so her. I mean, she was like, if you see her in sort of celebrity shots as a paparazzi, she pushed right through the pack. She was always in front. She had sort of no shame.
Yeah, good for Vivian.
Exactly.
Also, Vivian took some of her charges, the children she nannied for, to places like the stockyards in Chicago. That one just always tickles me. I can imagine in them seeing all these animals, going to slaughter, and the parents, meantime, have no idea that Vivian is doing this with their children.
Yes, that's Inger. That was sort of her second ward in Chicago. And I guess, there's just her and Inger, and they were kind of going around everywhere. And Inger was happy to go everywhere with Vivian. But I did talk to Inger about that. And she said that kind of drew the line. Like she had nightmares for a little bit afterwards.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
What of all the children that are still available to interview, did you interview? It appears like you interviewed almost all of them that you could find, that you were able to locate.
I interviewed a lot of the children and even a few of the people her age. The first person I interviewed was so exciting because I started to do my research in New York, because that's where she started her adult life, or her childhood, really. And there was a really interesting series of contact sheets of 3 sisters. And there were photographs taken on a roof of them posing, all 3 of them, and with their parents, and over 2 weekends. So I felt it seemed like she was friends with them, but she also was sort of her first photography setup. She was clearly staging them. And So took me a year, but I finally found one of the sisters, the last remaining ones. And that day I went over to Queens and interviewed her, and we looked at all the old photographs together, and she remembered so much about Vivian, like what she wore, what she was like, and she described her exactly like the people in Chicago described her. So it was really important, because then I knew, even at that young age, right when she was starting photography, Vivian was the Vivian we know.
So, and my next question or comment is going back to something you said about a 12 exposure roll of film. You know, as a photographer myself, I found it quite incredible that out of 12 shots, there are 4 exhibition quality. I remember hearing a very prominent wildlife photographer tell me that in a year, if he got 5 or 6, he considered that
Really?
a fabulous year. So hearing that 4 out of 12, I think is a testament to her eye, her composition. I see a lot of wonderful composition and technical skills. So I find that one of the more fascinating things about the work.
Yes, I think she had it all. Well, in the movie, Mary Ellen Mark will say she had it all. And I think really she did, because to pull that all together in one shot, it was really very rare that she took a second shot. And I'm always interested to study those rare ones to see what she didn't think she got, you know, to do the second one. But and in fact, in those cases, the first one would be lousy, and then the second one would say everything, you know. So
okay. And quite frankly, if Mary Ellen Mark says that about your work, she's one of the premier photographers in the world. So if Mary Ellen Mark says that, you know your work is considerably great. Yeah.
yes, that was high praise.
Yes, very high. Yeah. Her transition from New York to Chicago, it doesn't seem to change the photography really. It seems to be still the same type of photography. Could you talk a little bit about that? Didn't really matter where she was. She still got the same type of work, correct?
Well, it depends if she was out on the street or not, because when she was out in downtown Chicago on her day off doing street photography, it would be reminiscent of things from New York or things very specific to the streets of Chicago. But a lot of her photographs were also suburban nanny photographs. She took in Chicago, she took a lot of pictures of the Ginsburg family, you know, and so the subject matter was different, the balance of the subject matter.
And I was reading in your book that the subject matter changed when she had a time period where she changed jobs again, or when political things were happening in the 60s, that changed her outlook and her bent on photography. She did more political things, more newspaper headlines. I saw that she got LBJ and his wife, the Kennedys. So she got into some activism, some social justice at some point.
Well, an interesting thing about Vivian is that she was an activist in every area from the very beginning. When she started photography, she was taking pictures of integrated African-American children and white children playing together. She took pictures of African-American professionals looking wonderful in their suits. And this is before civil rights. We're talking about the early 50s. So she was so ahead and so progressive. And she was very big in the women's movement. And she was devoted to the Indians, which no one even really cared about the Indians then. And she, I think, visited 9 different reservations to photograph Indians. That's what she did on her vacation. So, and the poor. She very much cared about the rights of workers. So here's a woman who had such a difficult, this is the thing that I find amazing. Here's this woman that had a difficult childhood. She rose above it, established a life for herself. And then what did she care about? Everybody else. And she was very sincere in that. She was very well informed.
I also noticed on the Chicago photos, because I go to Chicago quite a bit, some of those places in the photos, at least the buildings, some of them still exist. So I guess I would want people to know that some of the photos we have, I can tell them what street that's on and what retail shop is there now, although it's not the same that was in her photos in the 50s and 60s. But I like that because I think someone could actually go and follow a little trail of, Vivian was here.
It's very thrilling to do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did that in New York, and every time I went to where she lived, and she took a lot of pictures of people from her building and in the neighborhood. And every time I found the exact spot, I was like so excited. It's really fun. And I don't know if you have this one picture, but it's at State Street in Chicago, and it's two African-American women on either side of the frame, and you can go exactly where she took that picture. It's a famous picture. You'll run into it. I think it might be in the film, but so it's just great to see where she stood and how she framed it. And sometimes it seems like impossible that if you stood when you're looking at the photograph, that if she stood there and you're looking at Google Earth, how she would get the photograph. But then when you went there yourself, you could kind of see it.
Yeah, that we do have one of Paulson's Coffee Shop, which is now a candy shop bakery type place on Wabash, with the man that was 7 foot or a little over 7 foot tall.
Oh, the giant.
Yes, the giant, which she said, I guess you kind of quoted that, like she must have written that down somewhere. I photographed the giant today. That one's
on
intriguing.
The back of that photograph. Yeah, the back of that photograph, which she hardly ever did, she wrote, "First time I saw the giant."
Wow.
And that photograph, if you really look at it, is amazing because the giant is so giant, and he's with another regular sized man, so he looks so small, and they're in front of a shopping together, like in the same store, even though they obviously wear different sizes. And then behind them is that coffee shop, and he goes all the way up to the sign on the coffee shop. Like his head is, in front of the sign. That's how tall he is. And then they have regular sized little old ladies underneath the sign, and they're just like ants. They're minute. And then the sign itself is like so feminine. It's like sherbet, chicken casserole, and whipped cream sundae, something like that. And so all the contrasts are amazing in that photograph.
They are, and that brings to mind that in almost every photograph, I feel like I want to take out my magnifying glass and look at every little thing. I guess we had someone come in, and the newsstand, the one of the man in New York with the newsstand, and he's asleep. The attendant is asleep and someone came
in and actually zoomed in on her cell phone to try to find the date on the newspaper of when that photo was taken and all that. So we have a lot of people doing that. They're coming in and they're looking at the cars and to see what kind of year that car was. The photo with the giant,
yeah.
It's incredible also because there's a couple women in the background looking at him, from the opposite direction that Anne was looking at him. So, and you're right, that guy next to him looks so short compared to him. And then the dessert sign behind it. It's just a testament to her incredible eye, I think, and her incredible use of composition.
Yeah, she could just put it all together with one shot. That was the only shot that she
in
took
one
right
story. Yeah, the whole story's there in one photograph.
I kind of feel like
but,
there's
it's
something
really fun. Like, go ahead.
I feel like there's something innate in somebody that you're just born with that ability to do that. Now, yes, I think people can develop that, but Vivian definitely had the it factor in photography, I think.
Yeah, I think she had innate talent, a real eye. I think what set her apart with that is that she had a real sense of humanity. She cared about people, she cared about the greater good. So you can relate to a lot of her photographs because she's capturing that.
What are some other ones people have asked you about?
Well, there's two, I want to say, older men, and they're looking down on a coil or a hose.
Oh yeah,
a garden hose.
And everybody comes up to that photo and says, what's going on? What are they doing? Why are they looking at that hose?
Is it the New York one or is it the vintage print one
it's
in
the
France?
The New York one.
Okay. Because there's a vintage print one in France where literally the same thing is happening with a coil.
Yes.
And men going, standing around it. So it's like very interesting. It was like the urban version of the same photograph, which you rarely see. But yeah, so that was in front of a church, and it looks like a handyman and another guy are actually, I think that one, was that a hose there?
I think it's a garden hose, and it looks like I think
Yeah.
the two men are in suits.
Yeah, two men are in
That's what's
suits,
so
and they're
curious
not
about it.
grabbing the hose or doing anything with it. They're just bent over looking at
Right.
it. Yeah.
Well, I thought, I know now what you mean. I thought that they were playing craps or something in it. But then someone
Oh,
else told me that's not what craps is. So I've always wondered a little bit about that. So I think that they may have just been two people, from the church, looking at something that they needed to do. But I think also what's very interesting is it's positioned so then your eye goes all the way through it, like down Fifth Avenue. You take it
yeah,
takes you
yeah,
through the
you're right.
photograph, and the
Yeah.
one in France is the same way. It takes you down a country road, like after you look at that. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
very much the same. If I figured out what that koya was, I forget now, but I was stared at it an awful lot.
And what's currently going on with other museums or galleries showing the work similar to what we have of Vivian Maier's work, or what things are going on in the realm of Vivian now?
Well, I'm not exactly sure in the US which shows are happening. I've sort of lost touch with that a bit. I know museums are starting to accept her work because, a lot of them didn't want to take it on because she didn't print it herself, which, is sort of puzzling, but that's sort of the history of photography. But I do know, they had the big show in Paris, and then that moved to Milan, and it was a huge blockbuster show. And now it's moving to Taiwan. And I think maybe they're going to try to get it back to Italy, another place in Italy. And it was supposed to go to Russia, except for the Ukraine situation. So Anne Marin is the one that manages that. And it's great for me because when she sets up a show somewhere, they'll take my book and opt it and produce it in a foreign language. So like I just got my Taiwanese book.
Oh, wow.
Which it looks really cool to see my name in Taiwanese.
That's thrilling.
So
yeah,
exciting for me.
we've sold out of the books. Already one round has been sold out at the museum, but we have some more. So if people are
Good.
interested in that, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
glad.
and we actually had to purchase a couple more, batches of it since it's
Yeah.
sold out. So it's a fascinating story. And I think we're also honored at Garrett Museum of Art, a little town in Northeast Indiana, to be in the same conversation as Paris and Milan and Taiwan and all that.
Exactly.
So
Well, I
we're thrilled
wanted to. I
about
love
that.
going to little towns, but I unfortunately couldn't make it. Or my schedule had worked out, I definitely would have come to Fort Wayne. So
We appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.